Hello, hello, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with tonight's program if you want to go ahead and take your seats. My name is Rachell Morillo, and I'm the DAJ Director of Public Engagement and Research here at the Institute of Contemporary Art. And thanks. It's an intimate evening, so feel free to get loud, feel free to be responsive, and to cheer me on because I need it. But yeah, thank you so much for coming out tonight for the official Philadelphia launch of Black, Queer, and Untold, a new archive of designers, artists, and trailblazers by Jon Key. Inspired by Key's formative upbringing in the South and his educational experiences in graphic design, the publication invites us to consider what it means and has meant to be a Black graphic designer, a Black queer graphic designer. For a lot of the questions are around how can identity be archived in a design canon that has consistently erased contributions by designers who were not white, straight, and male. The book is a tribute to all of those incredible designers and artists and people who are doing this work right here, right now. In addition to those who came before, I think we can all understand the importance of doing this kind of indexical work in this moment, where it seems like there are so many forces trying to consistently pose barriers and erase the work that we're doing. John's done a beautiful job of profiling over 50 practitioners and dozens of publications in a way that lays a foundation, a really important foundation for understanding the lineages that we are operating within as Black queer creatives. It is an index that will continue to grow. Beyond being an organized record, I've been thinking a lot about what it means to be indexed and create an index. An index provides definition, in this case of what design even means, but specifically, again, Black queer design. It maps overlapping histories and intersectional questions. It's at its essence a family tree, a depiction of a lineage of thought. And then when done for oneself and one's kin, it is also crafting a tangible language for oneself and essentially its power. It is a resounding declaration that we've been here and we will continue to be. This work of amending and writing and recording the voices of those often left unheard is deeply tied to our mission as an institution. As a non-collecting arts organization that focuses on the work of emerging artists and those who were otherwise unrecognized or under-recognized. In other words, those not in charge of how their stories are told or disseminated, as John writes in the book. We share in his pursuit of unearthing and showcasing these stories. Take, for example, our current exhibition, Carl Chang, Nature Never Loses, which marks the first in-depth museum survey dedicated to the innovative and genre-defying work of an artist who has been working since the 1960s. The show is a culmination of several years of close study and conversations between Carl and Alex Klein, who is the curator of the show, and in that way represents the kind of institutional investment ICA endeavors to have with all of the artists that exhibit here, a lifelong investment. Even more tied to tonight's theme, on the way in, you might have noticed entryways, Non Si Kalelo Mutiti, which is the commission that adorns our facade. The imagery in it combines histories of African hair braiding patterns with diasporic symbols often found in ironwork. These symbols that we're used to seeing everywhere, they're visually present in almost any architectural feature that involves ironwork, yet their history as bearing these symbols that originally were carried here by enslaved Africans and then stealthily included in these architectural designs is often overlooked. And so for this project, Nonsi draws a parallel between the way hair braiders continue the practice of protective braiding systems and iron workers and restoration workers that continue to ensure their survival and persistence of these symbols as important cultural makers. I say all of this to say that I'm really, again, so honored that we're able to host the launch for this book here tonight, given such deep alignment between our mission, this moment, and the text that Jon has so carefully crafted. To give you a bit of a rundown of what tonight will look like, we're going to start by hearing an excerpt from the book read by Jon Key, followed by a conversation with Jon, graphic designer Nijel Taylor, and multidisciplinary artist Qualeasha Wood. We've set aside time towards the end for audience questions, so if you have any, please save them for then. And the book will also be available for sale and to get yours signed in the lobby after the conversation. And now to introduce Jon. Jonathan Key is an artist, designer, and writer originally from Seattle, Alabama. After receiving his BFA from RISD, Jon began his design career at Gray Advertising in NYC before moving on to work with HBO, Nickelodeon, and the Public Theater. Now he is co-founder of the Brooklyn-based design studio Marcos Key with Rachell Marcos. As an educator, Jon has taught at MICA, Parsons, currently teaches at Cooper Union and the School for the Visual Arts in New York. Jon is also a co-founder and design director of Codify Art, a multidisciplinary collective dedicated to creating, producing, supporting, and showcasing work by artists of color, particularly women, queer, and trans artists of color. He was selected for Forbes 30 Under 30. We actually have two 30 Under 30s in the house tonight in 2020, and was the Frank Stanton Chair in Graphic Design at Cooper Union from 2018 to 2019. His work has been featured in Jeffrey Deitch Gallery, NYC, The Armory Show, The New York Times, and The Atlantic. He holds an MA in Design Research, Writing and Criticism from SVA. His writing has been featured in publications such as The Washington Post, The Black Experience in Design, and AIGA. Without further ado, please help me welcome Jon Key.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Jon Key, all the way in from Bushwick in Brooklyn. Took the train over. I'm just really grateful to have this opportunity to share my work with you all and to share these words and these people with you all. And I'm so excited about the conversation with Nijel and Qualeasha, two amazing people that I respect and feel so honored that they would agree to have a conversation with us tonight. And they live in Philly, and so it's just really important to me that we're able to celebrate people who are in this community. I'm gonna do a little reading from the book that is from the section called The Response. It's at the end of the book, but I like this reading because I think it really summarizes the goals of the project and what I was trying to accomplish. The call for me to do this project echoed from silence, the silence of not hearing stories of Black and queer histories in school, or queer representations in any facets of my early life. This book is an attempt to cull together the voices hushed through time into a collective uproar. Now reverberating back to me are names, pictures, faces, stories, language, and text. My body trembles from this wave. To be honest, every object surfaced and every conversation held to create this book surprised and fascinated me. I guess I was shocked that I was actually able to find examples. Erasure can make you feel that you don't exist in certain contexts, especially in the design and art world. The canon is exclusionary and has always made me feel like I would never be included because we haven't been included. I realized through this process that we, of course, have actually contributed more than can ever be known. This book binds together histories intensely intertwined. Each person and object curls and grows around seeds planted decades, even centuries before. This is a collection enabled and sustained by itself. This book is a testament that there is no singular depiction of Blackness or Black queerness. There is not one monolithic expression of who we are and how we existed in history. These visual forms represent how our stories shape-shift through time, morphing and forming into the codes decipherable by those looking in the shadows for light. Each of these individuals all had/have nuanced lives and tales to share. From Mary and William to Langston, Richard Allen, and Kari, they prioritized their desires and needs to see more accurate truths of Black queer American life in the world. These artists and writers were not afraid to share their lives and souls with us in hopes of connecting with others out there, now or in some future day. This research project was self-motivated and made selfishly in a way. I did this for myself originally to even see what was possible. I was told often it would be too hard or too difficult to find anything, that I shouldn't be surprised if much doesn't come up, that there is no history of Black queer designers and artists, that what little there is has been lost or misplaced through time. I started to believe this myself when I first began, but research requires patience and hope. This process was a labor of love, as they say. Unearthing histories is labor, but as we till the past for rock beds of memories or treasures intentionally hidden, we strengthen ourselves. Our tools are sharpened, and the work becomes easier. And the fruits and rewards can be unimaginable. I have received so much more love back.
And so now I'm going to invite Qualeasha and Nijel to join us up here. And as they make their way up, I'll read their bios. Qualeasha Wood is an interdisciplinary artist whose work contemplates realities around Black femme embodiment, both existing and imagined. Inspired by familiar relationships to textiles, queer craft, Microsoft Paint, and internet avatars, Wood's video, tapestry, and tufted pieces integrate traditional craft, performance, and contemporary technological materials. Her own image acts as a point of departure for works exploring racial, sexual, and gender identities as they intersect with the Black femme body. I didn't realize y'all hadn't met before. That's so cute. Sorry. From 2021 to 2022, Wood was an artist in residence at the Studio Museum in Harlem. Her work has also been included in the prominent collections such as the Art Institute of Chicago, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Rennie Collection in Vancouver, Canada, and the RISD Museum in Providence, Rhode Island. She received her BFA in 2019 from RISD and her MFA in 2021 from Cranbrook Academy of Fine Art in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, and is now based right here in Philly. Nijel Taylor is a graphic designer who has led the transformation of major brands across multiple industries throughout the last decade. As an accomplished creative director, designer, and strategic consultant, Nijel understands not only how to quickly generate great ideas, but also how to develop them with rich storytelling and strategic insight. He is adept at setting logo design, color, photo, art direction, illustration, typography, and 2D animation. I know that's right. With his can-do attitude and creativity, he loves to develop nothing but the best ideas for clients from start to finish. As a champion of DEI, he deeply knows the value of voices from all backgrounds can contribute to the design process. He believes being collaborative, curious, even-keeled, and efficient makes for positive and timeless work. He passionately sees design as a tool to engage others and create meaningful change. Through his projects, Nijel aims to create work that resonates with a diverse range of audiences and pushes the potential of branding. Contributing to the work of powerhouse creative agencies such as Lippincott, Trollback and Company, Superunion, and Siegel and Gale, Nijel has had the fortune of collaborating to transform and reimagine notable iconic brands such as Taco Bell, MTV International, the NFL Network, and Sesame Workshop, which that one has to be my favorite. I love Sesame Street. Nijel received his BFA from the University of the Arts, where he graduated as a valedictorian with honors in graphic design. He has taught motion design at Kean University and actively mentors industry talent. His work has been recognized by design publications such as GD USA, Logo Lounge, Graphis, and recently Graphic Design Solutions Edition 6 as well. And I got cut off there. I was reading it all. It's important because as much as I'm like trying to be here in the moment, I also recognize that this is for posterity, you know, and y'all are doing the work. And so it's important to list all of the accolades, even if I'm stumbling through them.
I should have edited.
Yeah, I think in thinking through how to start tonight's conversation, I, again, am hoping to like get a bit of audience involvement, inspired by actually your dedication in the book, Jon. And so you dedicate the book to the ancestors known and unknown. And I thought that we could collectively just take a moment to think about our individual creative lineage, whether you identify as a designer, as an artist, as a writer. You were called into this space for a reason tonight. And so to think about who has asked the same questions that you're asking of your work, who has taught you to hypothesize change and to think about what's possible, whose designs continue to shape your everyday. And then take a moment to say those names to yourself or out loud, and we'll take a minute for that. And then I'm wondering, actually, Jon, maybe you can kick things off, like, because we're all real quiet, so maybe you can warm us up. Yeah, whose names are coming to mind for you in this moment?
I mean, of course, for me, I immediately think about people that I interviewed for this project. And the very first person is Alan Bell, who is turning 80, like March 14th. And I actually saw him last week in New York because we were both at an exhibition together about kind of the lineages of design history. And he invited me to go to the New York Public Library to see his work in the archive. And it was amazing because it was work that he hadn't seen in 50 years. So for me, I think about a person like him as being this huge inspiration for me. Like, he created the first queer newspaper, weekly newspaper in New York called Gays Week. He created the first Black queer magazine that existed in America called Black, B-O-K. He created all these amazing, he used graphic design as a way to build community. And I think about that a lot in terms of the practices that I want to have and the things that I would like to do, from obviously the editorial, but also to actually connecting with people. So Alan Bell is a huge person for me.
That's so beautiful. Qualeasha.
Oh, I knew I was next. I think immediately the first people I think of are actually just women in my family, especially since that's where my relationship to textiles really comes from. So I think of my great aunt Catherine and my great grandmother Werner, who both used textiles, I think, as a way to kind of understand the world and to kind of process their own complicated relationships with the world. And they made mostly, I think, craft objects and things that were utilitarian, right? I got a lot of stuffed animals as a kid and a lot of crocheted blankets. But I found out after they passed, through my older cousins and family members, that a lot of the times when they were making things, it was because they couldn't express themselves outwardly. I had no idea that all of my emotions and kind of neurotic tendencies were in fact genetic. But I kind of found out in that way, right? That kind of there was just something really grounding for them about kind of sitting and creating. And that's where I learned it from, and that's kind of where I became tethered to these objects. And then I really immediately think about Faith Ringgold, who just recently passed last year. I met Faith when I was a freshman at RISD, and she completely changed my life. And she impacted my life when I was a little girl, just kind of reading Tar Beach and kind of seeing her different quilts and, you know, really going on all these museum trips, and kind of, she was always like that consistent figure that I always saw and looked up to. And I think meeting her and kind of, it was really a wake-up call. She was the first person that kind of told me, you know, that being a black artist wasn't always an option, especially when it came to institutions and it came to showing, and kind of even picking my major at the time. I was really struggling with, should I be an illustrator? Should I be a printmaker? Should I do something else? Should I drop out? Like, I didn't really know what to do. And she was just saying that I was in such a privileged position to even have those problems, and to even kind of be able to have this internal debate. Was really just such a different position than she was in, and then other women were in, and other black people were in. And so it really kind of, for me, just changed my entire way of how I approached my practice. Everything, I think, from that moment forth came to, I was just like, this is new, this is different, and I have to kind of do it in that vein, like in the honor, I think, of a lot of people that came before me. And so those are kind of the people that I really think about first and foremost. So.
I think for me, I've had a couple of different kind of bright spots. I think when I was younger, my dad took me to a lot of painting courses, and we had a lot of this gentleman's art in our house. And when I finally met him, you know, I got to understand acrylics and the messiness of it all. And I think his name's Dane Tillman, and he taught me a lot about iteration. I used to get super frustrated with watercolors, super frustrated with acrylics, to the point where I stopped painting for a while. But, you know, it's been something I've dipped in and out of, and it's inspired me to, like, understand that, like, iteration can be frustrating. And it's one of those things to me where I dropped painting for a little bit, then I tried drawing, and I dropped drawing for a little bit, then I tried photography. And so that kind of back and forth process ping-ponged me through all those things that then led to graphic design. And then, you know, when I finally got to graphic design, there's been a lot of people who've poured into me, Jon included. And I think, you know, for me, my first job, I got to work with someone who was willing to just take me under their wing, not gatekeep, you know, not try to be on top of me, but really work beside me. Her name's Sue Hale. I work with her today. I worked with her when I did Taco Bell. And, you know, she's poured into me in ways that I can't really say, you know, folks at other agencies or other bosses I maybe had in the same way she has. She's an Asian American woman. You know, she worked at Pentagram for a number of years, you know, and I always kind of joke to myself, at least, that, you know, you come out of school and you're like, oh, I want to work at Pentagram, I want to do all these crazy branding things. And, you know, I feel lucky that, you know, my first job I actually got to work with someone who understood that line of thought, but also had the emotional intelligence to bring people into the fold. And so, you know, I owe a lot to her.
Yeah, I love how you reframed that question too, in terms of people who have actively poured into you, because I think it recenters this conversation around, really what's at stake, right?
Wait, who are you bringing into the room?
Oh, that's a great. Thanks for the reminder. Yeah, the person who immediately came to mind as like someone who's passed as an ancestor was my great grandma, Amalia de los Santos, who I also come from a family of folks that work with textiles, and so she was like I'm Dominican, so in the small town where she lived, she was the seamstress, and she never learned to read or write, but like came up with entire systems for herself, and just like continued to make and to create and to do what she could for those that she loved, which was like not just clothe them, but like she was really great at like, she would see a thing, she would see what was in fashion and like was able to make that. And so, yeah, just thinking about coming from a lineage of people who have made a way out of no way and because it is such a grounding thing for them to do it for themselves, but also for their loved ones. And so that's who I'm thinking about right now, and my mom, who
Thank
has
you.
continued in that. But yeah, I think about what's at stake in this moment and why it's so important to be able to ground ourselves in the people who have poured into us, right? It's like, what do we miss? What we miss is opportunities for connection. It's like those cheerleaders who are there when you're super frustrated to tell you that you can find a way forward and that it's worthwhile in the end. Those people who remind you to care for yourself and that like this creativity is an innate process in that way. So yeah, thank you all for sharing. This book is deeply personal in so many ways, right? While you're establishing this new archive, Jon, you're also pulling in your own memories, including memories of really like finding your identity as a designer and navigating these systems that often could feel, if not hostile, at least like they were ignoring you or that you were without a context. And in the introduction, you reference a piece of writing that you did for a different publication where you talk about the 4 pillars that kind of structure your way of thinking as a designer. I'm wondering if you can like share what those 4 pillars are and how you arrived at them, and as well as how they continue to shape your work today.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so when I was in undergrad at RISD, as you know, it's tough. I graduated in 2013. When I was there in graphic design lectures, any of my classes, no one talked about anything Black, no one talked about anything queer, no one talked about anything people of color at all. And also, I had no Black professors, I had no Black classmates, it was just such a specific type of context. So a lot of times I'm trying to put a work in class and people don't say anything. People don't understand it. People don't have access to it. People don't want to try to have access to it. And so I end up just having conversations with like me and like a couple of my professors that actually started to identify, what I wanted to do. So one of my professors encouraged me to write and really to try to figure out like, how do I start to ask questions around the things that I cared about? And so my number one thing was like, well, does Blackness show up in my work? How does Blackness show up in my work? Can Blackness show up in my work? How does queerness show up in my work? Does my family impact the paintings I make, the design I make? I'm from Alabama. Does my Southernness impact the gestures or the patterns or the moves I make in these paintings? And does any of this matter? And I think that was a thing that I was starting from, just like thinking about things that were core to myself, things that when I close my eyes and kind of stream of consciousness, right, these were the things that kept coming up, was these kind of 4 questions and these ideas. And so those 4 questions then became, okay, I'm thinking about Blackness and queerness and family and Southernness. And then those 4 pillars then became platforms for more visual exploration. So the 4 pillars become colors, the 4 pillars become patterns, they become their own gestures, they have their own meanings that actually show up in paintings and graphic design, or the type of clients that I want, or how I want to communicate about my work, or the pedagogy in which I even teach students, and prioritizing that every single person has a story that matters, every single person has things in their life that will show up in their work, and those things are critical. And that actually makes each of us quite nuanced, and that's why our work matters. And so, yeah, and I think, all of this started from just questioning, like, why am I doing this work? Why am I at RISD? Why am I trying to be a graphic designer? And realizing that I had value and trying to surface that value as a armor. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the idea of, that nuance being value, but also I was talking to a friend about Julius Eastman recently, and And there is a quote actually from his brother where he talks about Julius wearing a double armor of being black and queer, and like wearing that super brazenly, right, in the way that he did his work. And I just found that so inspiring, and it felt so right. I'm like, yes, as an armor. I'd love to hear if you all have pillars, Nijel and Qualeasha, even if they're not four.
I think for me, and like I've kind of gone through cycles of inquiry, and I've tried to redefine what is it that I'm trying to build and how I'm trying to build it. I think for me, the 4 words that I'm at right now are authenticity and connection paired together, and then utility and optimism. And they all kind of feed into each other for me, at least. It's like the authenticity piece, underneath that could be about diversity, integrity, what feels right and natural to the onlooker. And then connection is being able to find relatability in not just the work that people see from you, but being able to really put it in a larger context and have a larger conversation. The utility and optimism piece for me is really important, because if something's not useful, and I don't mean in just like a pick up the hammer kind of sense, but actually meaningful and hold weight in someone's life, they're not going to want to take that idea forward. And so I feel like whether it's a logo or a color palette, or if it's fine art, or if it's an actual crafted object, like people have to feel like there's utility, but then also the confidence that it will be something they can build upon. And so, I hope that in the work that I make, I can create that convenience, that things are easy to understand, but also useful and real to the person.
Period. I think similarly, everything for me starts with a question. And I always am like, am I annoying? Because all I do is like question every single thing. Like, you see those kids and like, why? But that's, I think, really what the art process feels like. And I think one of the big pillars for me is kind of curiosity. Because I think tied into that, we're kind of told who we are in this world, especially when you are like a marginalized person or a minority in some way. You're kind of told how you fit in. This is your lane, kind of, you don't want to step too far outside of it. And if you do step outside of it, right, there seems to still be like a threshold or a barrier. And I think with my practice, I'm always kind of concerned with being really curious about where I am, where I fit into the larger ecosystem, especially in the commercialized fine art world. And those relationships, I think, with other people. I think audacity is a really big thing for me. Asking questions around like who gets to be audacious, who gets to kind of push back. Really everything for me is just kind of about someone telling me no at some point in time. No, you can't make work like this. No, you can't show this. Thinking about RISD, the first time I was really told no was my freshman year in a critique where I was supposed to make a vessel of containment that had personal meaning. So I was like, I'm gonna make a slave ship. I'm like, all y'all talking about when I went to the park with my dad when I was 6, I'm gonna make a slave ship. And I remember the reception was not good. It was so bad. And I remember my professor pulled me aside and was like, you can't do this. And I was like, why not? And at that point in time in my life as a freshman, I'd never really made work about myself or about my identity. I was really heavily into those celebrity portraitures, like drawings and ballpoint pens. So I wasn't at that time really kind of involved in a practice. And I think when I met that first no, it changed everything for me. So audacity / resistance. I think a lot about my identity, I think as a woman now, more than I did when I was younger, just as we watch every day. I think rights being stripped away, kind of just everything kind of feeling gets in flux. But even when I think about being a woman, I think a lot about performance. Performance as a tool for survival, as assimilation, as resistance. I watched this unfortunately, it was a meme format video of, I think it was Judith Butler kind of just talking about gender and the performance of gender, right? And how like feminism kind of stemmed from this desire to be different and to kind of question, well, does a woman have to do this? Does a woman have to do that? So those are kind of some of the things I think about when I'm making my work, and that I try to make sure stays in my work. And then I guess above all else, like authenticity. I think it's really hard to stay authentic. There are so many ways to position yourself as authentic. But when I really sit down at the end of the day and I look at my practice and I look at what I'm making, I'm thinking always about like, am I okay with it? Do I feel good about it? Is this something I'm personally proud of? Is it something that I want my mom to see from like the, you know, there's a lot that she shouldn't have seen, but there's, you know, I want her to kind of feel like, okay, like that's genuine, that's really her, and that's something that she really, really wanted to do. And so I think about those things constantly when I'm working.
Yeah, that's so interesting to me, and I feel like both of you brought up the idea of authenticity, and it's like underlying your work. And so, yeah, I would love for you to speak a bit more about how you know when something feels genuine and authentic. And I'm thinking about you, Nijel, and you, Jon, especially because I feel like you're in these positions where you're working with brands, you're working in corporate spaces, right? And so how do you continue to stay in alignment with your own perspective within those institutional contexts?
Go for it.
I think for me, it really depends on who you're speaking with, and like, are they really in tune with what they really got going on? And so like, you can talk to a lot of different marketers and teams at these brands and agencies and whatnot, and you know, you can tell who really embodies what they're really selling. And so the authentic piece for me, like, I try to stay attuned to, you know, how they move, how they position it, but then also sort of how they're dealing with me and interacting with me. I can say that I've had maybe like throughout my career, like maybe 2 to 3 Black clients, and those have been the best experiences for me because, you know, I didn't have to like be performative and pretend to have like the answers. It was like they trusted my experience when I walked through the door. I worked with them in a very collaborative and simple way, and they were willing to tell me what I needed to know to do my job. And like, to me, that's what authentic work is about. It's not just the final result, but also the process. And because they're comfortable being themselves and I'm comfortable being myself, I'm able to really get to something that really will work for them to tell the stories that they want to tell.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think like being a graphic designer, like, you know, it's a service job.
Yeah.
Like, we are in service to our clients, we're in service to the community, the people that are going to use these objects or whatever it is that we're creating. And I guess the number one way that I try to be authentic at the very start is by selecting clients that I feel like identify or agree with the values that I have. I think, you know, all of us can always have all these amazing opportunities, but it's that discernment that allows you to, you know, have a nuanced career and have the career that you want to have, and also be in positions that you believe in and respect the values of the work that you're doing. And I think also for me, I mean, I feel really lucky because I work with a lot of like Black clients all the time. I work with a lot of people of color clients. I work with a lot of nonprofits. I work with a lot of communities. I do work with like the big clients as well, but I think being able to like have that balance and like working with a lot of different, like most of our work is arts and cultural, which I think for me, it's like I am an artist. Like, this is the things I care about. Like, I'm not working or making things that are trying to sell people like cigarettes or something. Like, I smoke, but like, not like there's, you know, it's just like I'm not in that kind of market. Like, I think the work that we're doing is really about like education and community and trying to like talk about these stories that maybe you won't know about or maybe that haven't been shared before in these various different spaces. So I don't know. I guess it's all a big gut reaction. Like, it's a bit like you feel it. It's a hunch. Like, you know when you meet someone and it doesn't feel right. And we don't, I think all of us have those experiences and we don't know how to explain it. But I feel like that type of intuition, actually goes a long way, especially if you know, if you're very clear about what your values are as a person, which I think is the most important thing as a designer. Like, what are your values? Who are you willing to work for? Who are you willing to accept money from? Who are you willing to, you know, what are you willing to actually make and create? Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a huge question, right? I think for anyone as we do our work, is that, I was thinking about like how I would answer the 4 pillars questions. What's funny is like I thought about my Instagram handle, which is Negra Negra, which when I came up with it, I was like, oh yeah, like that encapsulates everything about me. I am a Black woman who speaks Spanish, like from the Caribbean, you know, but it's also like, it came from this idea growing up that like I would always get like, oh yeah, she's Black, but she's not black, you know what I mean? And so my Instagram handle is literally black. But that it's so, then I'm hearing the 2 of you and you went in such a different direction, I would say, in naming actual values, like not just like identities and intersectional identities, but to start with your values, right? And I'm like, oh, the Instagram handle still applies because I'm a Gemini, so of course it would be in there twice. And that's such a big part of who I am because it's about language, it's about curiosity. I remember the first time I got called precocious. I'm like, oh, I don't know what that means, but it feels like it's a diss, you know? Like, it feels like they're like, you're not supposed to be asking so many questions. And now, like, my job is to ask the questions, right? And so I think there's just like something so beautiful about like how each of you answered that question. But there was like this underlying theme that kept coming through about usage also, right? And enactment. Like I loved what you were saying, Qualeasha, about being a woman, because there's this Empress of song called Woman is a Word. Yeah. And for those who aren't familiar, one of the lyrics is, I'm only a woman if woman is a word. But the first time that I heard the song, I misheard it as, I'm only a woman if woman is a verb. And that's just stuck with me. I'm like, yeah, that feels right. If to be a woman is to enact a certain thing, that I am a woman, you know? And so I'm thinking about like how this conversation and the text that you've put together, Jon, and I'm wondering what each of you think about what it means to enact Black and queer identities in the work that you do. Like what does I think you said it in the call, in the conclusion. It's like, what does Blackness do? Like, how does it show up in the work? But also like what does it do? What can it do? And what do we need it to do in this moment?
Should I go first? I love this question. I mean, I think a lot about like the reason why the discoveries I made along this book is like, everyone's like, what does Black design look like? What does queer design, queer art look like? And oftentimes it's not about what it looks like, it's about the context. It's about the history around it. It's about the community around it. It's about how it's acting as a tool in that space, or even a weapon in some instances. Like I think about visually, like what were some kind of identifying factors in the book, or across time, and it's like this importance that Black queer people really wanted to show portraits of themselves on the covers of everything. They wanted to draw pictures of themselves on the covers of everything. They wanted to make sure that people, Black queer or not, saw a Black queer person. So if I was a Black queer person looking at it, I wanted to connect with them. I could see myself in. They become a mirror. They become someone that I can look up to. If you're not a part of the community, it becomes like, maybe this is a nuanced story that I haven't heard about. Maybe I have questions about what I'm looking at. Maybe the story isn't as clear to me, and I maybe should investigate that. And I think about that a lot with like the work that I make. Like, the reason why I make my work, the reason I have my practice is, one, to be visible, to create myself as a mirror for people that are younger than me that can know that they can be a designer, they can be a painter, they can be a writer, they can be a teacher, they can go into these spaces and exist. But at the same time, it's like I make this work as a signal to other people to build community, to find my own voice, to find the nuances of myself. And so in a way that it becomes self-actualizing, to be able to create, and then it comes around and it informs. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, it does.
yeah.
I'm thinking, I'm a very visual thinker, so I'm like, I was seeing you as a beacon. I was seeing you, do you know what I mean? Like, I was seeing you transform into all of these tools. Yeah.
I think when you said like context really matters, I think that's really important. Because like as like a Black lesbian, I think one of the critiques I've gotten a lot, or I get this a lot in interviews, and people are like, oh, like I didn't know you were queer, or I didn't know that was like a part of your work. And I was like, well, how could it not be if I am just that, you know, and that's how I exist, and that's the lens in which I see the world and the lens in which I approach my practice. And I think it shows up in the work like through that. I'm like, I don't think I would think about things in this way if I wasn't a Black queer person who had to have this specific experience. I wouldn't probably care about this thing, right, if my identities weren't kind of intersecting in this very specific way. And so I think a lot about how I want things to kind of show up in the work and how I want to show up, really. And I think when I first started kind of making the tapestry work, and everyone's like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I just kind of want to be big and Black in the space. Like, I was like, I don't think we see like Black portraiture like of like just a photo, large scale, life size, like bigger than life, larger than life. And I was like, and what happens in that space? And really my primary concern when I first started was just kind of disrupting that, changing how somebody might walk through a gallery, changing who gets to feel comfortable in that space. I was like, you know, I had this weird experience at the Met when I was showing work there, where I had brought in...
Casual.
Casual. I was at the Met, and I was cutting up at the Met. I had like 25 people there in this small gallery, and for me, it was amazing because, you know, you go into the museum and it's quiet. Everything's dead quiet. No one's talking. No one's close to anything. And I had 25 people yelling and screaming in this small gallery space. And then the security guard came and was like, you guys have to leave. And I was like, this is my work. I don't have to go anywhere. Right. And for me, that was just so major because I was like, only like through the comfort, I think, of seeing yourself, right, of being that mirror and kind of introducing that into the space, can you even change like the rules of it? And I was like to him, I was like, there are no rules that say that you have to be quiet up in here. Right. There's not a single thing that says that. Yeah. I'm like, I'm willing to bet a lot on it. But we're just not used to people, certain types of people coming into a space, taking up the space, being loud and kind of celebrating in that way, right? We're taught just this one specific way of experiencing art that is so exclusionary. And so I think a lot about like how identity, like how my Blackness, how my queerness, you know, how being a woman like really shows up for me in that way and kind of encourages other people to kind of be themselves in a different space. So.
I mean, I think from your experience, and obviously I know your experience firsthand, seeing everything you've done since we met, it's like you're kind of inherently disrupting things even if you don't mean to, right? Like I got to work with folks, you know, at these larger agencies, whether it be Lippincott or Trollback, and very different experiences, right? No matter the size of the place, it's the people that really set the culture. And you can imagine, like, I literally was like the only Black intern, and then eventually the only Black designer. And then, you know, at that point, it was a constant uphill battle to convince them that, like, hey, look, this sketch is good. And they're like, no, it's not. I'm like, okay, so why? And then they're like, well, it doesn't tell a story. I'm like, so what story are you trying to tell? And it's like, it's the client story. I'm like, okay, but what kind of story is the client trying to tell? And so, like, it just is this roundabout kind of move the goalposts. kind of thing. And it's not that they mean to do it or anything like that, but they're deeply rooted in their sort of culture of who they're supposed to listen to, right? And I think a lot of this industry, you know, design, obviously, you know, fine art and whatnot, you know, they built those roots. And so, you know, you're going to work somewhere and full time, they're going to be like, if you don't follow this road, you're out, right? And so I think what I've been, you know, I've figured out, at least for myself, is like, I want to be a part of some of those spaces, but I want to make sure I hold something back for myself. And I also want to be observant, because the way they interact with them, themselves or me, you know, helps me understand how they're moving, how they operate, and why they think what they think. And that helps me understand how to work with them, but at the same time, get what I need. I think a lot of what we're going through right now in our industry is like a lot of disruption, and if they're allowed to, they're going to take it all for themselves. And I feel like, you know, the opportunity that I got in 2014 to like have a career, to get to the work that I've done, I've always felt like if I don't someday make good on making that road happen for somebody else and many others, I'll be pretty upset with myself. Like, I've done a lot and I feel good about it, right? But if I'm not taking it a step further and making sure that this continues, I'll end up just being erased, right? They won't talk about me. They'll be like, whatever, like, and it's not just like, oh, start your own thing, whatever, but like really take a share of their clients. Like, that's kind of how I feel about it. No regrets, but just,
No regrets.
it's one of those
Not
things
a
where
threat,
it's like,
it's a promise.
I'm just saying, it's not a threat. It's like they've always been about competition, right? And they've always felt like they've always held those close relationships, but it's not going to be like that anymore. I mean, they're just literally not dealing with them like that. So I feel like it's my duty to step up and try to continue to broaden, you know, what design can look like, what brand can look like, how these, you know, places where work comes from works. It doesn't have to be this like gatekeeping thing. And then, you know, I want to keep it human, I want to keep it real, and I want to keep it nice, that people can come in and feel welcomed to actually have ideas. So.
Yeah, I love that. And I've got one more question. That was like a beautiful transition into it. I'm also looking at your dream hat. I've been looking at it this whole time. But yeah, I think so much of your answer is also about the legacy of your work, right? And how your work lives on. And so I'm wondering for each of you, how you imagine your work continuing, what you're most excited for, I guess, next, like where your dreams are, what you're building that arsenal of things for, you know, as much as you feel comfortable sharing.
I think right now, I mean, so last year I went like freelance full time, and it's been exciting because I've experienced a lot of success and freedom and flexibility, but I've also been able to be a little bit more in tune with my internal motor. I think I spent years trying to figure out like why I do what I do and understand it, because once you get out and you have to swim, right? So you better be very clear with like what is it about. And I think at this point in time, I'm kind of toying with the idea of a design practice, but I'm still working through it. But I do feel like it's the right thing to do, because, you know, going back full time is definitely a good thing. Anybody can do that, and I probably will if I have to. But personally, I like having the freedom to actually shape a process that's contrary to everything that they're doing. Like, it doesn't have to be the same process every single time.
Oh, I can go next. I think, you know, I thought about this a lot, actually, because I'm always kind of like, oh, what do I want to do? And I'm like, it's such a boxy question, because I'm like, oh, if I say it, do I have to stick with it? But when I really thought about it, I was like, beyond the art making, I think what I really value the most about being an artist is the community. And I spend so much of my time trying to bring my friends and people I meet into different things, and kind of, you know, thinking about like, what do I get out of this? What do I give from this? Even when I'm like, I don't do anything from a business-minded perspective or from the right perspective, and my mom actually really hates it. But when I bring people into the studio to even work with me, I try to pick the person with the least amount of experience. And the person who really just wants to kind of be there and learn, and somebody I can learn from. And I think those are always the things that really just stick out with me. And my really good friend and I, Malika Tembo, who's a textile artist, we have this collective called Play Nice, which is a Black woman-led minority space for artists and designers and creatives who are tired of kind of playing nice and playing within the rules of a system. And we've been doing this for probably like almost a decade, probably like 7, 8. And then I was gonna say 9, and then I was like, let's not count to 10. We've been doing this kind of for a while, and really the whole point has just been about supporting people and kind of seeing what they need. And I think as we kind of go forward and we're looking at the current climate in the world, it's so important to kind of just be together. Whether that's something like so small that you're extending, whether it's your time. Like I was saying to my friends who were asking me to read a cover letter, I was like, look, time is the most valuable thing you can give to someone right now. 5 minutes of your day is still valuable. An hour of your time is like, woo, you know? And so I think what things look like going forward for me are, yes, I have the art and I'm gonna do all those things and, you know, take the money I can while the money's still good. If it's still good, I don't really know what's happening with national endowments and everything. But the only way I look forward to the future is through other people. And so I'm really excited to kind of keep doing that and kind of work in just different sectors. I don't know, I kind of want to do it all. I keep saying it's a world takeover, but when y'all see me just completely pivot, I'm gonna need y'all help because I don't have no design skills.
We'll get there.
When y'all see me pivot into film in 5 years, don't say anything. Like, I'm gonna have to touch a lot of things.
No, I mean, doing it all, I feel like, is obviously my motto. I'm a painter, I'm a designer, I'm a writer, I'm a teacher. I think teaching, to me, is such an important way of giving back in terms of a legacy, in terms of having students that you believe in, that you want to see succeed, and giving skills and changing the shitty ways that you were taught and trying to like be better than what you had. But I am working on a film. That's like my next project that I literally just started last week. The New York Public Library, like, is this filmed? Legally filming in the library. But I think it's really important, like, to be able to take this book project and represent it in a way that is about people. Mm-hmm. And so basically this documentary that I'm starting is about Alan Bell and his community of people that he had around him, making Gays Week and making BLK and all the publications that he did, which really turns out to be just a bunch of 80 and 85-year-old like Black queer folks that are still living and breathing that need their stories documented. And that's something that I'm really excited about. And when I think about my legacy, I think about being able to, wow, like Jon really like taught people a bunch of shit they didn't know, you know, and brought a lot of voices that weren't known to the surface. And then somehow, I don't know, had a practice at the same time. And I don't know, it's just, it's crazy. It's like, I don't know, it's amazing like being these kind of multidisciplinary, multi-hyphenate types of artists, and one form is not enough to be able to truly express all the things that you feel and all the things that are happening in the world and all the things that are needed to, I don't know, help people reimagine what the future can be. And so, yeah, that's what I would hope. Like, I hope people think I help them reimagine what the future could be.
I think we think that. I think we already think that, so you're already
We know
there.
that.
Right, we know it. We know it.
Jon's a world builder. I've always said that. Like, you are. You really are.
Thanks, guys. I love you all.
Oh, so sweet. We're going to open up to questions from the audience, but I also just think that that deserves a round of applause because that was so sweet. But yes, if you have burning questions for any of the folks up on the stage, just pop your hand up and we'll bring a mic to you so that everyone can hear your lovely voice.
Hi, this was great. I'm new to Philly, so it's nice to see like Black queer creative things going on. My question's for Rachel. I saw on the interwebs, we're new friends, and you said that you're coming out of retirement. And so I was curious, what made you say yes to emceeing and facilitating tonight's conversation?
Oh boy, was not expecting me to get a question. Yeah, I mean, where do I go? Okay, so I'm the director of public engagement here, which means that a lot of my time and a lot of my effort has gone, for the past 2, almost 3 years, has gone towards programming in this space. When I think about my purpose and my role here, I do think of myself as this other arts educator that I worked with a while back when I was at MoMA has this beautiful essay about arts educators being the handle into the room, right? We are the ones that enable the door opening. Sometimes we are the ones that prop that door open. And so for me, I see that as what I'm doing within this institution, right, is making sure that events like this can happen. And so Jon has been working with us on some more institutional design, and I just remember you're like, oh, I'm having this book talk during Art Basel, and I was like, you wrote a book? What is this book? And then I checked out the book, and I'm like, no, but we need this in this space, right? Because part of being what I understand to be the opposite of a gatekeeper, it's really about busting the door open, taking it off the hinges if I can, is seeing the opportunity, seeing the connection, being able to contextualize it, which for me is also about making sure that we can be in the space and sharing our thoughts safely and comfortably, right? It shouldn't take putting risking life and limb basically to do this, right? And today that meant facilitating the conversation, but I'm really glad that I got to be up here with y'all, because I think it's a reminder to myself that I started this work and my journey to this place because I'm also an artist and a writer, and that I shouldn't neglect those parts of myself just for the institutional work that I'm doing. So yeah, thanks for the question.
Hello. I have a question about what you guys are talking about, authenticity. There's a way that I kind of maybe understood authenticity as not happening in a silo, but it being me. But from you guys talking, it sounds like the mirror is necessary for creating kind of a true understanding of the self in this way. So I'm curious about what are your mirrors, the people around you, that help you to see yourself most authentically? And then I guess I missed the beginning part, but Jon, I'm curious. I met you once at a Codify art meeting, so I'm curious if that's still a collective, and if so, or if not, how that collective has informed who you are now.
I can start with that. So Codify Art currently is on hiatus, but I think we worked together. I mean, Codify Art was a real active collective for 7 years in New York, and basically it was founded because a bunch of students from Brown and RISD, who were all friends, my friends, we all moved to New York, and we're our artists and designers are where are the people of color that are queer in New York? We can't find them. We don't know where they are. Why are there no spaces or any events or anything that's talking about queer people? This is 2013, so this is completely different landscape in which we are right now. And so we took it upon ourselves to do that. It started with doing open mic nights and networking events and throwing gallery shows in our apartments and inviting 150 people over just to see our paintings. And then we started curating shows. It really expanded and expanded. And I think for me, I wouldn't have a career if it wasn't for Codify Art. I think for me, it allowed me to, one, make work, because I think it's so hard to make work in New York City. It's so hard to just carry a big box down the street by yourself. And you need help. You literally need help to do things. And two, it was amazing to be in a community of people that were all makers and they're all struggling together that you could bounce ideas off of. But I think the mirror in that was just knowing that, I don't know, like, this community exists because we are here. This community exists because we're working. This community exists because we're trying to find it. And that inspires my work. I don't know. And I think this idea of a mirror is very interesting because, who are my mirrors? Like, I wrote a whole book of people that I feel like I am reflected in, or they have glimmers of them in me, that I didn't know these people before I wrote this book. I didn't know anything that before I wrote this book 5 years ago. And I think that was the whole search was to be able to, find place in this context and community of white design that I did not feel a place in. And I think that's sometimes important to know that you can do something, is knowing that you aren't the first, or knowing that there are examples. And I think, but the flip side of that is like, it does have to come from within, like that question, that zest, that ambition of wanting to create something against the odds, and knowing that you're like, I don't know, we know the ancestors are with us, like, that they have paved these pathways for us to be able to make the work that we can make. So, I don't know. It's a mix. I mean, codify is super important because there's community, but the ancestors are important because they remind us that this work has been done before. We're just extending or building upon what they have done.
I think it's also a reminder that, like, nothing's impossible, right? Despite something might feel impossible, something might feel new, never done before, there is always an example where we can look back and say, this person has done it against these odds.
Right.
That might have been way worse than what I'm going through right now.
Exactly.
I think in terms of authenticity in a mirror, I think for me, like, my mirrors are really just everyday people. What I'm gonna say is so controversial, but I really don't care what a critic has to say. And I love writers. I write a lot. I wouldn't be anywhere without a writer, technically, but that's also, like, not who I'm making work for to get the praise of or the opinions of. I've had writers say great things. I've had them say mid things. I've had them just, I don't know, exaggerate. But I think for me, I'm always like, well, what does this random woman on the street who just, like, walked into the gallery think about the work? I eavesdrop on conversations all the time. I'm so nosy. It's the Scorpio in me. But I really think, for me, I look at the everyday experience because that's who my audience is. And I think about, like, just black women and really for me, especially since everything stems from when I was a little girl, right, going to these museums and not really seeing people who looked like me that weren't working as, like, security staff, like, on the walls, unless they were, like, enslaved. I really was like, what are kids thinking? And even though, like, a lot of my work is not really for the kids, it's still for, like, that kind of idea of that shift. And so that's who I kind of look for in those spaces, and I look for when I'm considering the work that I'm making, and I'm considering kind of that audience. And I really consider my family a lot. My mom was the first person, and I'm really close with my mom and my family, so I talk about her, unfortunately, nonstop. And if she could have been here today, she would have been sitting, like, right in that front row embarrassing me. But my mom was the first person to tell me I was elitist. And that's such a dig. Nobody wants to hear that, but my mama had to tell me that. I was, like, a sophomore at RISD, and she was like, you done got up there in Rhode Island and lost yourself. She was like, you have lost the plot. I don't know who you're talking to. She was like, we did not read all these books that you're talking about, and the way that you come home and try to change everything, right, and think everyone is supposed to talk a certain way and think a certain way is ridiculous. And I never forgot that lesson. And it really, I'm so grateful that she called me out on it and that she was able to do that, because it shifted what I even wanted from an art practice, who my art heroes were, what I thought was good black art. And so, my mirrors kind of just, and authenticity for me kind of starts from that place of how does just anybody off the street no arts education access this work? Can they access it? And then I go from there.
I mean, I agree. I would say everyday people, I kind of attribute a lot of like how I reflect through the people that have been with me the longest. That's my partner. That's like my friends from home. And also like my design friends from college. And so my friend Donald or my friend Max, they both have kind of had their journey through tech. And they have a different perspective on how that side of creative and design has kind of shaped and whatnot. And, we tend to kind of get together and kind of think through like, each other's paths and kind of offer insight on how like, hey, corporate America over here sucks, but over there is a suck. Okay, so if they played you like that, did they play you like that over here? And then we just kind of strategize and we kind of think through like, how do we navigate these spaces, continue to do it boldly and strongly, and continue to kind of move upward. And we just, we have those kind of conversations. It's been comforting to me to have, those different experiences, but at the same time be able to like come together and understand like, what are we doing it for, why, and, be invited to understand their side of it and mine. And so it's been great. I mean, like Donald is like the person I call like once a week, like from college. So like those are the kind of relationships you can't really move away from or anything. And so they know you and they're able to kind of hold you true and accountable. So.
Yeah, I love that because I think how all of you chose to answer the question is like, who is your loving mirror, right? And as you were talking, and also as I was like, how would I answer this question? My loving mirror is definitely my mom. And also now all of the people that I get to mentor, right? Because I'm at that stage. But just knowing that those are so necessary because there are so many other surfaces and other people and spaces that reflect back at us that are not loving mirrors, right? That are showing distorted or misunderstood, decontextualized versions of ourselves. And so that it's so important in a world full of those, living in this fun house right now, to have mirrors that you can go to and say, yes, this is not only a reflection of myself, but it's a reflection of myself as I imagine myself, as I like see my full potential and my full self in my mind. These people also can hold me to that. Yeah. I think we had one more question up front.
Jon, you said something early on that's been kind of stirring in my brain around all these kind of existential questions about your work, and you kind of capped that with, well, should I even be pursuing, or is it justified that I be pursuing? And so that kind of takes me, there's a lot of bravery in doing work like this project that you've done, maybe some audacity, if you will. I'm curious, as you kind of choose to carve out moving forward, 10 toes on the ground, doing something like this, where do you find that audacity? And any of you in your work, of this kind of sort, where do you pull that from? Because there's real bravery in that, I find.
Yeah, I think this is a good question, and I don't know. One of the family members I talk a lot about is my grandmother, Ruth Mae Giles, in the book, and I feel like she was this very like rambunctious, feisty, Southern black grandma that didn't take anything, and I think that she, like, out of all of my mom has 7 brothers and sisters, and out of our whole family, like, everybody agrees that my twin and I are like the people that knew our grandmother the most, and also are probably the reflection of her in terms of how she navigated space. And my grandma would always have this expression that was like, you better show up and show out. Like, that was the only option. And thinking about that in terms of, just being able to have the privilege to do this work that I do, and understanding the space that I get to take up, and all of these amazing opportunities that I have. I just think about my grandma being like like, don't waste this opportunity. Like, this is an opportunity that can inspire. This is an opportunity for you to learn and grow. This is an opportunity for you to make her proud, make the family proud. And both of my parents ran their own, like, my dad runs a construction company in Alabama, and it was amazing seeing, like, two married people, like, they're divorced now, but two married people run a business together in the South and see their audacity in terms of knowing that that was even possible, and knowing that they didn't take, constraints and limits for an answer, and always encouraging us to, push and do better than what we have seen. So, I mean, I think in that sense, like, it's all my family, And, I mean, because if it wasn't for my family, I wouldn't even have the next step to like, research or find these other people, or to, have the courage to step out to meet other people, build that type of community. Yeah.
I feel like I have a long list of reasons to be audacious. I'll keep them really short, though. I'll start by saying I'm a Scorpio stellium, so vengeance is just in my blood. It's like, I gotta get my lick back at everything I do, and if you've seen my work, I make diss tracks sometimes in the pieces. I dedicate certain things to somebody who made me mad. I'm very much I have to prove you wrong person. But my mom is also from Alabama, born in '63. And every single day of my life, I think she reminded me that there was something at stake. Like, just something. It was always, oh, well, you can go to school because, when I was a kid, they were calling in bomb threats, and, I had to go. And then when I had to leave, my grandfather had to walk and pick me up. So I think there's always that. But then I also just think, like, from a fine arts perspective, through a historical lens, there have been so many audacious dudes who have made, like, some of the worst work, but, like, we're able to just so confidently contextualize it. My least favorite and favorite artist is Marcel Duchamp, because, my God, to, like, just steal a urinal from a woman, actually, I think from Philly, actually, but to steal something, put your name on it, document it, and be like, it's art, and that's just it. I think learning about that when I was a freshman really changed my perspective on what art was, and I realized art is kind of, in a way, very made up. And so at a certain point, it becomes about who is the most audacious, who's the most bold. And there are always going to be people that are willing to kind of take it a step further. I think I was taught that I couldn't explore that avenue or that path, right? And I think as a Black artist, I was really taught that, like, everything I did had to be justified. Like, every single little detail had to matter for some extreme reason, and I had to link it back to some fact. But, like, over time, I learned, like, that's not really true at all. It's an expectation. And then lastly, I'll leave it at this. Kim Kardashian made a whole selfie book, sold it off of, like, some of the worst photos I've ever seen.
I have it.
Me too. It's like my like studio party trick. Like, I'm always like, you want to see what I have? They're like, what, like, inspires your practice? And I'm like, well, here's this hardbound copy of Kim Kardashian's selfies. But when you look at that and you realize she's, like, launched, like, a multi-billion-dollar, maybe that's too much money, I don't know. Kanye's worth, like, 72, right? Multi-billion-dollar empire off of her aesthetic, which is really just a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. You kind of have to realize that your potential is really where you set it at, and the sky is not even the limit. And so I think that is really kind of what fuels me into kind of taking risks, into going further, because I'm like, the only barrier between me and that thing is somebody telling me no. And if you tell me no, I will find someone else to say yes, or I'm going to do it without you, and then you'll have to eat the no. And so that's just kind of, I think, my general approach.
I guess audacity for me kind of translates to, like, where my ambition comes from. And I think my dad, like, was in the military. And
Same. Both my parents.
My dad and my mom owned a business, divorced.
Same.
common denominator. But yeah, I mean, like my dad took care of us when we lost our house. You know, conveniently lost our house right when I was supposed to go to college. And so, like for me, watching him struggle, work hard, leading up to that moment, because the writing probably was on the wall that we were going to lose the home. You know, it kind of flipped the switch. Everything he taught me around strategy, and like we used to sit down and play chess. I'm not good at chess, but what chess is, I understand it. It's like 2 steps ahead, blah blah blah. So I've always just sort of had like sort of a kind of, he kind of called it the other day like a soldier mindset. I just kind of attribute it to like, you know, this is the path I have to walk, and so that's what design was for me. And now that, you know, it was a mean for survival all the way through the last 10 years, I'm finally be able to like, you know, thrive on it, enjoy it. Like Jon said, pick the clients I want to work for, and really find, you know, and redefine it for myself. And so for me, it's being able to, like I said before, like find that internal motor, but then also be inspired by like the way I was brought up. Like for me, my dad, you know, he never really like stopped working. He's finally retired. My dad's good. But it's one of those things to me is like I'm inspired to take care of my family. I'm inspired to kind of continue to move the way I need to move to keep building, so that we don't end up in a situation like that again.
So real. Well, I think that's a great point to end on. Can we say thank you to Jon, Qualeasha, and Nijel?
And can we say thank you to Rachel for
Yes, big thank
doing
you.
amazing moderating of this
Thanks.
panel for us. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you so much for celebrating this book.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming. This was a great conversation.
It's a juicy one. I feel like we're going to be playing it back for a while. Just to plug that, please help us with the food out there. Please eat some food. And there are books for sale in the lobby that Jon will sign if you're nice to him. So thanks again for coming, and I'll see you out there.
Yay.